Hi, it's Carolyn. My guest today might love horse racing more than anyone I've ever met. And horsemanship is not only in his pedigree, it's in his soul. Sean Clancy is a champion steeplechase jockey who is even better known for bringing the legendary stories of the great horsemen to life in the Saratoga Special. This is Racehorses Etc., the podcast celebrating horsemanship. I'm Carolyn Conley. I've covered horse racing on TV for over a decade, exercised some of the best horses in the world, and represented top jockeys. Here, I speak to icons and everyday racing folks to deepen our understanding of horsemanship. Hey, Sean, welcome to Racehorses Etc.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, it's so fun to have you on the show, and I've followed your work for a long time. You're a writer, editor, publisher, owner of ST Publishing. And what does that really mean? It means you're one of the guys behind my favorite newspaper on the planet, the Saratoga Special. So you bring something so fun to the sport of horse racing. So where did it all begin?
It really started with my brother, Joe. He was a journalism major in school, working at a little local newspaper, and I was riding races. So we started the Steeplechase Times in 94. So we did that while I was riding races from 94 to 2000, and then started the Saratoga Special in 2001. And it's 20 years, amazingly.
Where did you start riding steeplechase horses?
My dad owned and trained horses, so I grew up with it. First picture of me anywhere, and I'm in a win picture of my father's. He's riding a jumper at Radnor Steeplechase, and his owner, Donald P. Ross Jr., who actually they owned Delaware Park years ago, he's holding me in one of the pictures, and all I have on is a diaper. I have no shirt, no anything, and I went to the races every time there were runners, I went as a little kid, and then all the way through school and started riding pony races. And then my first thoughts, I was like, I want to be a jockey. And that's all the way back to mid 70s when I was a little kid.
So how did you begin competing? Did you ride for your dad at first?
Yeah, so I started riding pony races. I was lucky I got on we had a really fast race pony. He was the king of all race ponies. He was a thoroughbred twin named Red Raven. And he was actually by Gunshot, and he's actually related to Seattle Slew. So it was great. So there was Ricky Hendricks had him first, and Blythe Miller rode him. Santa Hendricks rode him, or Santa Nelson. Now Santa rode him. Everybody rode this pony, and I was lucky that I came along. I was the last one to ride him. We knew, and it was very funny. We knew he was old. We didn't know how old. Nobody kind of knew. And I rode him 14 races. He won 10 and was second 4 times. Years later, we finally got his actually pedigree, and he was 22 when I was riding him. Yeah, last year he was running, he was 22.
What a hardy thoroughbred.
He lived on the farm until I think we put him down. He was 30 when we put him down. And we didn't know, then we were like, Red's old. We didn't know. I think if we knew that he was 22, I'm not sure. We figured he was 15 or something, He was like the epitome he was just a little racehorse. He'd pull to the start and get down and get wound up at the start, and just, he was like, and just all class. That's where I learned, those were the first great lessons of my riding, career, was all from Red Raven. We shipped him to the Iroquois Steeplechase for a pony race there. And I'll never forget it. It was a $500 purse, and they gave me a check for $500 in the winner's circle. I just handed the check to him.
Oh my gosh, that's big money.
I was 14. And I went to give Dad the check. And Dad was like, "No, that's yours." And I just remember, like, at 14, I was like, made $500. That was a lot of money.
You'd arrived at that moment. And then you went on and rode Eclipse Award winner Flat Top. Was that part of your champion season?
I won a stake on him. I didn't ride him a lot. I only rode him a few times. I rode Victorian Hill, was leading earner of all time. Flat Top, Rowdy Irishman, 2 Ridley, some really good horses. It was fun. I had a great career. It was fun. And I look back with, great memories of it.
How did you get from steeplechase riding to flat racing?
I mean, my dad did both, so we were very much doing steeplechasing and flat racing. I mean, my father was stable he was stable at Timonium during the summer, Delaware Park, places like that. So he had plenty of flat horses. I mean, he won the Federico Tessio with a horse named Format. He trained for George Strawbridge, which, I mean, that at that stage is, Augustin stable. I mean, I look back on, I didn't realize it at the time, but there was no way we could take Red Raven to Nashville, Tennessee, except he was getting on George Strawbridge's van with all George Strawbridge's horses. So you were able to tag along and do those kind of things. It was just great opportunity, I mean, for a kid to go do those things. My dad had a filly named Tatty Bogle who won a couple of big stakes, and I was galloping her and running her. I'd lead her over there. And that was when I was like, I don't know, 16 or 17 or something. I don't even know. And that was such a big deal. I remember him asking me, he's like, do you think you'd like to run Tatty? And that was like, I think that was really the first horse I'd ever run myself. I mean, I carried the bucket next to my brother and next to all the people who worked for Dad over the years. But I remember Dad driving the van, me in the back of the van with Tatty Bogle to Penn National, sitting on the tack trunk all day, running in the race. She won a little stake off the grass, and cooling her out, and then putting her back on the van, poulticing her back at the barn. I mean, just, when we got home, it was like, I mean, I think a lot of us grew up that way. It was just brilliant memories.
Your dad obviously was quite a horseman. What do you admire most about his horsemanship?
Dad's interesting. I mean, he's retired now, but I think he's 85 or 86. And, it's funny. People will ask me, like, I have these great friends, my buddy and Kate Martin, who have a farm, and I lived with them for a while. And it was very funny. They would ask me, they'd say, Sean, what do you think we should do with a horse named Truly Nolan? They'd say, what do you think we should do with Truly Nolan? His leg looks, I think he's got some filling in his leg. And I'd say, well, call Dad. And so we called Dad. I mean, I'm like, I would have a pretty good sense of what to do, but it was always, call Dad. And he actually eventually worked for him and was their farm manager for years. And we always laugh about that. It was always just call Dad. Dad was, was never a great like salesman by any means, very much an old school horseman, grew up with it. His father was around, took care of fox hunters and did a little racing, and very natural approach to horses. Really kind of slow down and stop and think about what they need. He had a fox hunter. We called him Rich. He was just a lovely horse and hunted him for years. And I remember I called him one day. I said, "How's Rich?" And he was gearing up for the hunt season with Cheshire. I mean, my father was fox hunting Rich first flight with Cheshire Fox Hunt, which is a big, good fox hunt, all the way to he's probably 80. And he said, I don't have him there yet, but he's close and he's getting there. And it was like, he was training that fox hunter to get, it could have been Charlie Whittingham talking about Sunday Silence. I remember bringing jumpers back. He brought a horse named Oh What a Chief back. He was 13 years old and finished second in, one of the biggest races of the year at 13. Just all the basics of horsemanship and that respect for the horse. It probably was just, you say it was born into you, but it was really just from those formative years. Like I said, the win picture when I was a month old with that win picture. And then you see the pictures of me riding. And my last race I ever rode was in November of 2000. And there's Dad in the win picture. So your life, there's 30 years of my life that's come full circle from being a month old when he was riding to being 30. And there's my dad, in the win picture. That's where it all started.
That's really beautiful. You've brought so much of that passion and understanding to your work in both your website and the Saratoga Special, which can be found there as well. Your respect for the horseman is apparent in your articles. You obviously grew up with that respect. What has it meant to you over these last several years publishing the Saratoga Special to kind of document some of the old horsemanship and your favorite trainers along the way?
I mean, I think that's really been the basis of what we've wanted to do, was to try to bring those stories to people. And I mean, my favorite thing to do at the Saratoga Special is to just spend time with usually the trainer, but a lot of it's jockeys too. I mean, I love really, love talking to the jockeys and getting in their head too. I mean, over 20 years of doing the special, my favorite moments, my favorite articles, the things that have brought the most joy to me are the moments with, Bill Mott. I mean, the stable tour with Bill Mott at Saratoga is just like, I mean, and I feel so lucky. I feel like it's just an honor. I mean, to walk down. I mean, here's a Hall of Famer who I respect I respect his horsemanship to no end. And we start at one end of his barn and go to the other end, and then go to the little barn. He just kind of opens the door and walks in, and then you think, well, I guess I should follow him. So then you walk in, and sometimes he doesn't say anything, which is so Mott too. But, as a writer, you're like staring, you're in the stall with Royal Delta, and you're just staring at her. And Mott's not saying anything, which he doesn't need to, because it's Royal Delta and you know what she looks like. We've all seen her, she's just standing there in all her glory. And I'm thinking to myself, how do I get Bill Mott to say, he's got to say something? I can't, or this is not going to work in a print newspaper the next day. You're like, and then you hear your recorder and you're like, oh my God, you're like, I say, wow, she's big. It's like, it's just terrible, but those moments of walking up and down his barn, Alan Jerkins, as everybody knows, is, one of my all-time heroes, and a great friend and a mentor. And, I used to I love, everybody was sad when he stopped riding his pony, which it was kind of sad that he wasn't riding the lead pony. But for me, it was such a gift, because he was in the golf cart then, and I'd just jump in the golf cart and ride along with him. And I'd have my little tape recorder. I'd have the tape recorder kind of hidden, which I never even knew he knew I had. I was like, he never said a word. And then years later, Leah Giarmati said, she said he'd see me coming and he'd say, oh, and he's got that damn machine with him. And I'd be hiding it. But, riding around in a golf cart with Alan Jerkins, talking about, prove out an onion and galloping these horses, stretching. He was so brilliant. He'd stretch out these sprinters and galloping horse 3 miles, galloping horse, train them twice a day. The pony blowout, he'd be on the pony, and then he had a really good pony boy named Judum. And Judum, he would pony, blow the horse out while ponying the horse. They'd blow out a eighth of a mile and, 10 or something. I mean, you got to pull him up sharp. You can't let him, you don't want to overdo it. You got to pull him up sharp. And he had all these great things, which I've chronicled him. And I pretty much have every word he ever said to me somewhere typed out. Those were brilliant moments. Frankel was amazing. I mean, that was a guy that I never thought I was so intimidated by him when he first came to Saratoga. We just started the special. I was scared to death of him. I thought, I'll never have a relationship with this guy. He's just, as we all knew him, he had a real gruff exterior. But man, walking down his shed row and talking about horses. I mean, I would walk back to the barn with him, and we just talk about Flute and, all those horses, Empire Maker. I mean, the Triple Crown with him was just like, I mean, I was never been so shocked when a horse lost a race. I mean, I was standing in the Derby. I'm like, I just could not believe Empire Maker got beat. I mean, I'll never forget it. Shug McGahee. I mean, there's times we did when Shug was inducted in the Hall of Fame, we called it Shug's 32 Flavors, and he would talk about the horses. And I mean, it's just gold. I mean, when you hear his thought, like dancing spree, I mean, the stories on these horses and lore and one after another, it's just such an education. I mean, for me as a writer, it's such an education. And then for the reader, I've always felt like that's really what you're trying to do. You're trying to bring those stories to life. And I mean, our game's tricky. There's a lot of people who just don't understand what goes into it. And so if I can bring that, I mean, I'm not saying it's Tom and Joe and all of us and great interns. I mean, we've got amazing kids come through there and go on to great things. So all of us have tried to bring that to life.
One thing I enjoy about the Saratoga Special is seeing you all on the golf cart with the interns and the newspapers, and everywhere you go, there's smiles and people want the paper. People love the newspaper, the Saratoga Special up at Saratoga, and you just have these smiling kids that are working their tails off. And I love seeing young people working hard. It's something we don't see as often as we used to, and I know it was a big part of my life. I couldn't ride a horse unless I mowed a lawn and had the $7 to go rent one, and maybe enough for my brother to ride too, since he was going to have to drive me there.
Exactly.
So that I like to see kids working like that, and they're hustling and working, and it's just really fun to see you guys out and about.
That's been, I mean, if I had a choice, if you said you can go to the track in the morning or the track in the afternoon at Saratoga, it's an absolute no brainer. I would take the morning. I mean, just because it's the vibes there and the energy's there and the day is still fresh and young and early and the kids are out and the horses are going and you're working and everybody's, everybody's just in there. It's just it's the racetrack. That's in its element. I mean, it is literally like that's the the joy and the beauty of the track is the morning. And I just love that part. And, we're picking up stories and people are saying things and you're handing out papers and then you look up and you see a horse gallop by, you're like, there's Royal Delta, you're like, wow, look at her, whatever. So that's been just, I don't know, this year's so different. Whether we go or not, I don't know, or how it's going to go, but that element of it is where you're really going to miss out, I think, of Saratoga, that the atmosphere and vibe and the energy of the morning.
And I think a lot of trainers would agree with you. I've spoken to Hall of Famers who said, gosh, they just love the morning. They love training their horses. And one even said, boy, wouldn't it be nice if we didn't even have to run them at all? We could just do this. Exactly. And I think sometimes we forget about that when we focus so much on what's on TV and we're watching the finished product or watching the racing and not necessarily seeing all the background. It's easy to forget the magic, and the magic happens in the morning.
Right. Yeah. Tom Voss once said I had a couple horses with him over the years and great old friend of ours. And he walked up, he sent the horse out of the paddock and he's walking to the big screen to watch the race. And he said, I'll never forget, he says, I hate running them. I just hate running them. And I thought, oh, wow. That's, it's like, you think people think that's the best part, right? Running them. But when the trainers are dealing with every day and, it's hard. I mean, it's like a lot of us, you'd like to just train them and never have to run them.
So you work with your brother, Joe. You two on your website have the inside rail and the outside rail, your two columns. What's it been like to work with your brother throughout all this, especially having grown up like you did with your dad playing such a big part in your life?
My brother is the reason why I'm a writer. And I could have easily been just an old beat up jump jockey with nothing to do after I was finished. It was all his mentoring and I was going to retire from riding in 96. I had too many concussions. I was really in a bad way. And, he got me an internship at the Blood Horse. I'd written a little bit for Steeplechase Times, but that was our thing. I wasn't a writer. I was panicked. And I look back, my brother, he read everything that I ever submitted anywhere. He read it first for, years and years. I was writing for the Blood Horse and the Racing Form and Mid-Atlantic Thoroughbred. And my brother read every word I wrote. I would write a Blood Horse article, 2,500 words on favorite trick. I remember writing that when he was Horse of the Year. And I wouldn't dreamt of sending that to the editor, Dan Mearns, back then. No way would I have sent that without my brother reading it first. He's just a rock. He's just a very steady, genuine, lovely, steady person that is just the most grounding influence on my life.
What's your age difference?
5 years.
He's the big brother.
Yeah, he's the big brother. Yeah. 5 years older than I am. We're both Aries. He's born April 1st. I'm April 9th. Grew up in the same household, obviously. Do the same thing. And we are so different. Just like And that's part of why it really works, because we have such different skills and such different approaches. All the way back to Steeplechase Times, I had literally read a magazine, the Chronicle of the Horse, had an article about my career in it. Not my career. It was about a day. I'd won 3 races at a race meet. I read the article. They had a bunch of mistakes in it. I got fired up and called my brother and said, we should start a steeplechase newspaper. We need to do this. This is ridiculous. Nobody's covering this sport. This is great. I went crazy, right? Like I can. I mean, I was on a landline, from my future wife's house. I was dating her in 1993. She was riding. I read the article. I got so fired up. I called my brother on the landline. The next day he calls me back and he says, right, if we do 7 issues of the Steeplechase newspaper, it would be bi-weekly, come out every other week in the spring. We can start a week before Aiken. We'll finish a week after Fair Hill. And if we don't make any money, if it's a complete bust, we will lose $5,000. And I said, okay. He said, do you have $5,000? He had just gotten married. I mean, he's like, working his tail off. And I said, I was riding races. I said, yeah, I got $5,000. I could blow $5,000. I don't want to, but yeah, I could do that. And, but it was all him. He had gotten all the details, figured out how we were going to do it, how it was going to work. So we revved it up, started selling ads. And after 7 issues, the company wrote a check to me for $5,000. So I got my $5,000 back after 7 issues.
Excellent.
It's pretty good, right?
I love how pragmatic he is. What a great asset for you. Right,
exactly. In the newspaper business, in the publishing business, he's so good at it. I mean, he's the guy laying it out, getting all the ads straight, making sure everything's done. I mean, he's like, and Tom Law has been an absolute godsend.
Yeah, I see you guys going 24/7 at Saratoga, and I don't know how you do it. I can see why you have sort of a seasonal approach when you push yourselves that hard. But you mentioned what a mentor your brother was in terms of your own riding, and clearly that's paid off. You won the Eclipse Award for riding when you chronicled the estate auction of Hall of Fame trainer Sidney Waters in 2009. What do you remember most about Sidney?
Sidney was a guy, I wasn't around him much. I just was, watching him from afar. And I did like all his old great jumpers and the flat horses. And he was a guy that did both, which I loved. I mean, the horsemanship to train a champion. I mean, he was the first trainer that ever trained a champion on the flat and over jumps. Shepard's subsequently done it, but he was the first. And, just a great old horseman, very old school style. He was like, he did the love sign. She won the test, came back, won the Alabama. You're like, man, how did he do that? In like 7 days.
In this estate auction of Sidney Waters, what were some of the more remarkable pieces that were being auctioned off?
It was so, it was one of the most unnerving things I've ever experienced. When we left there, my brother and I went, and we left there, and it was like, and I tried to write it, and it was like you just saw your life, it was called Life's Work, and your life's work just being auctioned off. I mean, the family, I think, they were pretty much in disarray. I don't think they were getting along, and they ended up just with this, estate sale, and they were literally just putting things on tape. There was like cardboard box of like his eyeglasses, some handkerchiefs, and a pocket watch, or and then they were selling art. There were some huge things they were selling, but they just sold everything. I bought his binoculars, and that's what I wrote. I put that in the column, and they were old, like that old metal like binoculars, and they were all beat up, like the finish had come off the metal, so you could see they were like black, but you could see right into like the metal from wear and tear, and I just looked at them like, oh my God, you could just see them hanging from Sidney's arm and going up the stairs at Saratoga and clanging on the box seats when, Shadowbrook or Love Sign or, one of those Quick Call, one of those horses won or lost. It was like you were looking at these binoculars going like, this is the man's life right here, win or lose in all these races. So I bought those I think I bought them for $40. I mean, it was just ridiculous that, and actually still had his name, You remember the old plastic, it was a labeler. Remember the old labelers?
Yes, my dad loved those.
Yeah, they're great, right? So it has the label is S. Waters Jr. on the right around the end of it, so it's in an old leather strap that's had a knot in it. And I just remember I was so saddened by it that I was buying Sidney Waters binoculars for $40 because there was nobody else like his. I don't know. It seems like his kids should have had him, or should have been some. So it was very unnerving when you were there. You were looking at a man, like his life's work just being sold, and people were buying stuff. I mean, I remember Joe Davies was there. He was buying stuff because he's a great mentor of his, and Dickie Small was there. He was trying to buy as much as he could. He bought a beautiful old painting of Sidney on a gray horse. I remember there was an old bench from Belmont Park that obviously Sidney stole, or his help stole, or somehow it got on a van from Belmont Park. It was, you looked at it, it was just absolutely like, that's a Belmont Park bench, right? And I think Joe Davies bought that, who actually subsequently bought Sidney's farm, which is brilliant. So it's actually kind of come full circle. So I'm sure some of that stuff that Joe bought is actually on Sidney's farm again, which is cool. I mean, that's kind of neat that it is poignant that it kind of turned out that way. But it was amazing just to watch. I don't know. I mean, I just remember Joey and I were we were just floored by it. I mean, completely floored by it.
Well, clearly you brought the passion of that, the sentiment of that to your column. What was it like to win the Eclipse Award?
It was a real honor. I mean, I was, I'd had a couple honorable mentions, and I mean, it was like everybody, it was a big honor to win it. You feel like you're recognized. It was cool to see people reach out that were really close to them and kind of appreciate what I'd done or what we had done.
You produce a newspaper. Let me rephrase that. You create a print newspaper at Saratoga in an era where everything's gone digital. Yet people love to have a copy of the Saratoga Special in their hands. Do you feel pressure to eliminate a print edition because we're seeing less and less of that nowadays? Or is there something about Saratoga and having a print newspaper that's important?
I mean, it's a great question. And we obviously, we talk about it a lot as far as, how to kind of adjust and how to handle that. If we're doing the Saratoga Special, and I'll declare this, I feel like Joe Biden declaring is like running mate's going to be a woman, but I would be confident to say that as long as we're doing the Saratoga Special, and as long as there's a printer that will print it, it will always be a print product, because I think it's really important to have it as a print newspaper, to hand it to people around the backstretch, to have people, at the races with it, and walk in a guy's barn and throw it on a desk and have people reading it. In today's world where you're going so fast and everything's just flat out, I just think we've really lost that kind of the social structure, the neighborhood, I'm trying to think of the right word. It's like the community of it, and the social part of sharing something. And I think it's important. People are reading it digitally, around the world, but on site at Saratoga, I think it's so crucial to have that print newspaper.
Does it represent something bigger, something about the tradition of Saratoga, the tradition of horsemanship?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very old school. I think it harkens back to the history of our sport, the history of Saratoga. I think it's, I mean, I think I think it definitely represents that. Back when I was going to Saratoga with my dad, I mean, I remember getting the pink sheet. That was huge. And the pink sheet would come out. They would actually print it. It would come out at night. I remember sitting in a restaurant, and the kids would come along selling the pink sheet, and it had the results of the day's races in there. and you'd buy it, and you like, before, obviously no internet, no phone, no anything. We'd take the horse fan up there to, get the horse settled down, go to dinner, and then actually get the newspaper to find out who won the races and who was running tomorrow. Remember when you got the overnight, you had to get the physical overnight in your hand to see who was running? Oh my God, look at this. Wow. 4 goes running in wow. So yeah, I mean, it's a real tradition to it.
Yes.
The tradition and history of horse racing is so crucial. It's so important.
You and your brother Joe and Tom and your employees have captured so much of the tradition of Saratoga. You've brought it to life for people like me who grew up on the West Coast and didn't have a background at Saratoga. And I've never been to the spa without reading the Saratoga special. They just go together. As racing changes, and we're in a very quickly fast-changing world, what traditions do you hope the game holds on to?
I mean, I think the horsemanship, the respect for the horse, the sporting nature of our sport. I think we've gotten so far away from that. It just keeps going. The racetrack managements, where they worry about full fields and betting handle, and I just feel like we're really getting away from the sporting nature of horse racing. Saratoga, for example, the stakes, the horses would take an extra turn of the paddock. And that's how far I go back. When I was a kid at Saratoga, you knew it was a stake. Even if you didn't have a program and if you just woke up and walked over there and you were standing there, you knew it was a stake when the horses took an extra turn. Meaning the jockeys would get on and they'd walk around, and then instead of going straight out of the paddock, they'd take an extra turn and make it.
And that was for the fans.
That was for the fans. And
yeah.
that, right, because they were giving the fans another view, just a little longer view and another view of their horses. And that's what we're supposed to be doing. We want people to come. We talk about, we want people to come to the races. And look at Saratoga's paddock today. Sadly, they have sold there's tents, there's bars, there's TV studios. I mean, just the space around the paddock for the people to see the horses has been limited so far in a not a long period of time. Never mind not taking that extra turn in the paddock for the stake. I mean, that, like, to me, that is, it's so, little things like that are so crucial to keep those traditions. And, that they run stakes, if it's a short field, they're running the stake as the 3rd race or the 5th race. And I understand the bottom line. I understand the economics of a pick 6 and the pick 5 and all that stuff. And I understand that, but you have to really walk. There's a real balance that you need to keep to protect the sport, protect the class and the sporting nature of our sport, and also run a business. I understand that, but it's like, I mean, we've gotten so far away from the respect for the horse and the old school horsemanship. Just filling races. I mean, like Jerkins. I mean, we would talk about. I remember it happened so many times. It'd be Jimmy Jerkins, Leah Giarmati, Fernando Abreu, myself, a couple, maybe a jockey too, an agent, whatever. We'd be standing around talking at the barn or at the Morning Line Kitchen or wherever, talking about Jerkins and what he used to do. He'd be like, man, I think he blew that horse out the day before. Then he galloped him 3 miles. He was trying to get, and we'd be talking about it. And it happened 10 times in the middle of the conversation. The chief, he'd be listening. He's an amazing guy. He'd just be kind of half listening. You'd think he's barely paying attention. In the middle of it, you'd hear this out of the blue, and you always stop because it was the chief. He'd say, "But you knew when the race was," and he'd just scream it. And we'd all look at each other, and he's like, "Now you never know when the race is. They give you 25 extras, and then you don't know when you're ever going to run the horse." Back then there were, you knew you had a condition book, and the races were in the condition book, and you could train your horse up to that condition book, to that race. Now they give you 15 extras a day, and I understand it. Racing office, I understand it. They're getting pressure from management. Fill these races, full fields, and they don't let races go with. That's why we're going turf sprints. More and more turf sprints, because they fill. But that's getting away from old school horsemanship and taking care of horses. Trainers today, you could ask any of them, they're just training horses. They're just in perpetual training because you never know when the race is. The condition book and the way they fill races, it's like, horses aren't even trained to a race anymore. You can train into a stake because you know when the stake is. And you can ask any trainer. It's easier to train a stake horse because you know exactly when the race is. Okay, not this year because of the corona, but it's like, you actually can point your horse for that race. You can back off for 2 weeks, skip a work, back off, get it, and then bring them back to that race. That's not my opinion. That's Alan Jerkins. I mean, the chief every conversation, he would say that. I mean, he said, but you knew when the race was.
That's such a good point. I've often wondered, why are we seeing less horsemanship? And that's it right there. You cannot gear a horse specifically to a certain date.
So important.
And read them according to how you're preparing for that day. You just have to be sort of at the ready. And then
yes,
if you don't enter, you're in trouble and you might lose stalls.
Right, exactly. There's pressure on trainers to run. I mean, the pressure on trainers to keep stalls from the racing office that's what people just don't. They have no concept of what that's like. And I understand that. I understand the racing office. I understand the business of it. But horses are the maintenance works. Trainers just give horse maintenance works because you have a race to enter. Oh, I better work them a half a mile because I got a race that I'm entering tomorrow for a race on Sunday. You work the horse on Tuesday, you enter on Wednesday, race doesn't go. Okay. You come back on they brought it back. Okay. You put them back in on Thursday for the race now is on Wednesday. So you put them back in on Thursday, race doesn't go again. They bring it back again. You enter Friday for a race on Friday. Now your horse hadn't worked since Tuesday because you worked him for Tuesday because you thought you were going to run on Sunday. Now it's Friday. You're still not in, and your horse worked last Tuesday. So what do? You work him again on Saturday because now the race is Friday that you're entering in. You have to work them before you enter, before you know if you're in Saturday morning. Your help's off on Sunday. I better breeze them again today because I can't get to this race. I can't get to this race without a breeze. If you last breezed on Tuesday and now the race is Saturday.
And they're saying trainers breeze their horses too much. Well, that's why.
Maintenance breezes. I mean, and believe me, there are trainers who just systematically, they've got a system and they breeze their horses. There's certainly guys like that. But
right.
But I know from Jerkins, he would absolutely, that's just my experience of listening to him. And it was just a huge part of it. The amount of horses that are ready to run and can run, but the races don't go, they don't get in, they overfill, they don't run, they bring them back. It's madness. And
believe me, as a jockey agent, I used to have a beautiful call on a horse I was so excited to ride. The race didn't go again, finally went. But by then, another horse we rode was ready to go. So he would jump in the race. And pretty soon I've got 2 calls and you can't make everyone happy. Exactly. You're going to upset someone.
Exactly. I have a line for it, and this is just simply my opinion, but the constant demand and desire for full fields has ultimately led to smaller fields because people can't train horses for races anymore. They just enter and enter and enter and enter. And then your horse gets hurt. I mean, you've given them 5 maintenance breezes because you keep entering them back. You can't keep a horse. You know what it's like. You can't keep a horse on the ready for a month. I mean, you can't do it well. So horses get hurt. And then the other part that would help with horsemanship is uniform entry days. In the Mid-Atlantic, you enter Monday for Laurel on Saturday. You enter Tuesday for Delaware Park on Friday. For Wednesday, I'm making this up, but I don't know the specific dates, but
have 5 condition books in your pocket. Yeah.
Every Monday in the country, in the United States, if every Monday you entered for Saturday, at every racetrack, you entered Monday for Saturday. You entered, and that afternoon, you knew if you were going to run. Okay, that didn't get in, that's fine. If you can't fix the, 15 extras in the 25 races they're trying to fill, okay. At least you would know the horse is not running Saturday. Done. Okay. Day, you enter for Sunday. You enter your horse. Oh, didn't get in. At least you know he's not running Sunday anywhere. Wednesday, you enter for Monday. It would make such a difference.
That's a really good idea.
People could actually train horses. They could train horses up to races. You would know when they're going. The amount of races people skip. What I mean is you enter Monday for Laurel on Saturday, and there's a race on you enter Tuesday for Friday at Delaware. The race at Delaware is better. So you skip the Monday. You skip entering at Laurel on Saturday because you like the race better on Friday at Delaware. You skip the Monday.
It doesn't go.
You skip the. It doesn't go. And then you're like, oh man, I would rather run the horse at Laurel than not run him at all. But I skipped that spot to wait another day to enter him for Delaware Park. Little things like that would improve if we're talking about horsemanship, taking care of the horse and taking care of the owner and trying to improve the experience for everybody, improve that. Little things like that, I think would help a lot.
I think you made a really good point just now that horsemanship is more than how you directly handle a horse, but it's how you enable horsemen to handle their horses. And we have many layers of it in our industry, and we all have to come together to optimize it. That's for sure. You spoke to one of the greatest horsemen of all time in your most recent article of the special, and I saw this online. It wasn't the Saratoga special because we're not within the parameters of Saratoga right now. Regardless, it was an excellent article on Charlie Whittingham. You did a lot of research and spoke to a lot of people that were associated with the bald eagle. What was the most surprising discovery during that research?
That's a great question. Yeah, I had never been around Charlie Whittingham, obviously, because he's Californian. I've actually spent very little time there. So it was fun to write about somebody who I hadn't written about. And I knew how much people respected him. I mean, that was part of the reason why I wanted to write the article. So I think the genuineness of Charlie Whittingham was the most, it wasn't surprising because I kind of knew that, but I loved hearing that from Shug McGahee and Todd Pletcher and Darryl McCarr and Chris McCarron and Richard Mandela, and just to hear them tell a story or talk about how genuine he was and with his time and his his advice. At the very same Breeders' Cup at Churchill Downs in 1988, he's there kind of cheering Shug McGahee up, who was down, feeling like he had a bad day, had a win in 2 seconds, but he was kind of kicking the ground as he was leaving there. And here's Charlie Whittingham kind of consoling him, saying, man, he asked Shug, what kind of day did you have? I had a win in 2 seconds. He said, oh boy, you had a good day. And that really influenced Shug. I mean, he still remembers that conversation. At the very same Breeders' Cup, Todd Pletcher, who had worked for him that summer at Hollywood Park, here's Todd. I mean, he's like, I don't know, 18 or 20 or whatever. He's a kid. And he had worked for Charlie Whittingham that summer, written him a letter thanking him for the opportunity. And Todd said he goes to Churchill, and he said, I want to stop by. He said, I'd stop by Charlie's barn, just say hello. And he's thinking, man, this guy ain't even going to remember who I am. I'm like, he's walking up there like, oh, this is like, he won't even remember who I am. And he sees him, and Charlie Whittingham walks over and shakes his hand and says, thanks for that letter, Todd. It really meant a lot to me. And you think, wow, there's a guy that the influence of that one day at the Breeders' Cup, he's influenced future Hall of Famer Shug McGahee. I think it was 37 maybe at the time. And he's also influencing Todd Pletcher, future Hall of Famer, who's 18. Completely different scenarios.
Wow.
So there's Charlie Whittingham. I mean, he's competing too. I mean, he's running horses at the Breeders' Cup, but he also has the wherewithal, the genuineness, the class to influence two guys that he could have easily not noticed Shug kicking the ground, and he could have easily not remembered Todd Pletcher or blown him off because he was busy with the Breeders' Cup. But no, he took his time, took the time to just be a genuine good mentor, influence, and make a positive difference. And the other thing you have to remember, I made 5 phone calls about Charlie Whittingham. I made 5 phone calls. Those were the 5 stories. I could have easily gone to the next 5 and got 5 more stories, and the next 5 and got. I mean, I could have called you and said, "Give me your best Charlie Whittingham story."
Kindness. His kindness radiated in the barn. It's funny. I first arrived Santa Anita Park, and my father and I had driven overnight from Washington State and stayed at the little Motel 6 across the street. And my dad shined my boots. I was 19 or 20. And we walked over to Clocker's Corner. And I think it was Chris Speckert, actually, the trainer, said, "I have someone you should meet." And he escorted my father and I up to Charlie's barn, which is now Mandela's barn. And I really did not know the scene at Santa Anita. So I was just sort of in awe about everything. And he introduces me to Charlie, and Charlie says, "Young lady, where have you been exercising horses?" I said, "Seattle, Longacres." And he said, "Well, if you can hold those horses, you can definitely gallop mine." He said, "You're hired."
Wow.
And he hired me on the spot.
Wow.
And it turns out he went back to Seattle. I think he worked on the starting gate crew up there, and he was down in Mexico, at Tijuana.
Wow.
But it was just wonderful to just be around him. He was he's kind to the horses, kind to the dogs. He'd stop in the tack room in the morning before we galloped the horses and just sort of say hi with a twinkle in his eye. And everyone was called Charlie's Angels. We were mostly girls. There was a couple of guys there, but kindness is the biggest word I can think of. Yeah.
Yeah. Amazing guy.
Yeah. Well, it's been fun, Sean. I really enjoy celebrating the goodness of this sport and the history and the horsemanship, and you're just the guy to do it with.
Thank you. No, it was fun. It's great to reminisce and great to talk about the horses and horsemanship in this sport that we love.
And keep up the good work with the Saratoga Special. That is a beloved newspaper, and people can find your work also on This Is Horse Racing online.
Exactly. No, we will. Hopefully Saratoga will come back in some form or another this year, and then hopefully next year we're there with the golf cart and the kids and the papers and the great horsemanship and enjoying the sport again.
All right. Well, see you soon, and we'll be looking for you online.
Sounds good. Thanks.
All right. Thanks, Sean. Bye. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Racehorses, Etc. Please go to CarolynConley.com and become a Racehorses Insider. We'll keep you up to date with exclusive content and more. That's it for now. Remember, until we meet again, enjoy the horses.